Hello, welcome to the Football Diary podcast in a wet, miserable weekend in the UK, but plenty of footballing sunshine in the Premier League, of course. Chelsea win again, who'd have thought? Villa and Tielemans tame the Wolves, and Smith-Rowe continue his fine Fulham form. But guess where we're starting this week, chaps? We're starting at City versus Arsenal, because that's where all the action was, really. And I've got a special guest on the pod today in Isaac, in his Arsenal colours. How are you doing, man?
Yes, yeah, not bad. Thank you. Thanks,
Not bad. You're going to say you kept that diplomatic then, didn't you?
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry if I start crying or swearing or one of the two.
Well, it was a must-win for Arsenal, really, I think, wasn't it, mate? Because I think with City being ahead, Arsenal had to keep pace, didn't they? So to get a draw in the way this game went felt like a defeat in some ways, didn't it? Sum up your feelings for me after that goal went in, that equaliser from John Stones.
Yeah, it's frustrating in the end. I mean, it's always when you concede so late like that, it's always gutting, isn't it, than if it was earlier in the game or whatever. But I don't know about must-win. I think going to City and getting a point over the course of 38 games, it does feel like a loss because of the way it happened. But I think when the smoke clears and you look at the actual result of a point at the Etihad again, you're not going to be as upset. But now it does feel like a loss. At the end of the season, it might not. Yeah,
well, that's the thing. You never know with the way the season pans out with City. They kind of are so relentless, aren't they? And that's why I say it felt like it would have been a monumental victory, wouldn't it, Myles? If Arsenal have held on, that would have been probably one of the highlights of Mikel Arteta's reign so far. But it's a cruel way to kind of lose that win, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they took 4 points from City last year. And if they could have gone one better than that this year and got 2 wins, then yeah, of course, that puts them firmly in control, it feels like. I know that is the calmest and the most level-headed we're going to hear, Isaac, in this whole party, taking that diplomatic point. I like that. He's saying, yeah, no, a point is fine. I'll tell you now, I watched the game with him. A point wasn't fine at the time. So I'll be interested to see how that goes.
It was not fine.
It was not fine, no. Well, we'll try and pick through the many, many talking points, but I think we have to start with probably just the way the game sort of started, really. Obviously, Erling Haaland's goal, a great pass from Savinho, but then Calafiori's goal to equalise was stunning, first of all, Isaac. But there was contention from City fans that it shouldn't have been allowed. Now, I know how you're going to feel about this, but what do you think City fans are feeling? How do you think, could you relate to how they're feeling about that goal? Or do you think they just shut up and accept that it was just a fantastic break from them?
Yeah, I mean, I heard Walker interviewed and he was sort of saying about that he obviously explained his reason. I understand if he didn't go up to the ref, he was called to the ref, so he should be given time to get back. And he made the like comparison of, if it was the goalkeeper, you'd let him get back. He's like, yeah, okay, I understand that. But you were back. You chose not to go and mark Martinelli straight away. So the ball gets popped over your head and then you have a problem with it. You're in the back line. It's not like you're still walking back from the ref. You are in the back line. So if that was me, I'd probably sit and moan about it as well. But when you look at it, nah, not a chance. You're back. And if you chose not to go out wide, that's on you. And so, yeah, the goal, mate. And the goal goes on from that. The ball gets played back to Calafiori, yeah. And I mean, okay, it's only a couple of passes from the initial free kick. So again, yeah, I do understand why he's upset. Yes, but tough. I ain't bothered. You had enough decisions. So if one doesn't go your way, I really don't care. Cry me a river.
The Arsenal response, though, was pretty impressive, Myles, wasn't it? I think going behind fairly early as well to that goal from Haaland could have broke spirits, but Arsenal have shown a heck of a lot of spirit every time they've faced City in recent years, haven't they? Especially in this game when the going got tough, which we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, Calafiori's goal and obviously Gabriel's goal as well. Real resolution from the team, isn't it, to get back into the game and get ahead?
Yeah, particularly Calafiori, I think, because for the first City goal, he was largely at fault and he was having a torrid time defending on that left-hand side. So for him to break forward and have the kind of confidence to hit a ball like that, it was outstanding. So excellent to see him rising to an occasion. It's a big debut to make, isn't it?
Yeah,
first game to kind of get you started. And it wasn't necessarily one that I would have thought he'd be dropped in at left back for, because you know that City have got a lot of pace on the flanks. That's not necessarily his strength. But actually, it turned out to be a really good position for him to hold when they did move to that deep lying defensive line. And the corner routine, look, we know what's going to happen there. We know that Arsenal are going to be lethal in that sort of situation. Gabriel, he gave him a warning shot early on. They didn't deal with it properly the second time. And Kyle Walker, again, kind of got left looking a bit silly for both goals, didn't he?
Yeah, well, I'll let you interject there, Isaac, as well, because at that point when Gabriel scored, it looked like it was going to be a decent afternoon for Arsenal, didn't it? I mean, City tried their best but didn't have any answers. And it's only when they really made substitutions when they were chasing the game and put, I think it was Grealish on and Foden, that it really seemed to click for them down the flanks. But up until that point, dare I say, Arsenal looked fairly comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, the first 10 minutes, I mean, when you look at the chances that City had, there weren't a lot of clear-cut chances. The Haaland one was really the major one I can think of, which obviously, Calafiori was probably at fault, gets pulled out because he dives in and it leaves a massive space for Haaland to run into. But after the goal, we did look quite comfortable. And, I think, again, that was that gave a lot of, it gave people a lot to say, essentially, a lot of City fans a lot to say because of the way that it's a defender just hitting a strike and it's another corner. But if you don't like the way a team is beating you, that's up to you to deal with it, really, isn't it? There were so many conversations about Bernardo Silva talking about Liverpool. Oh, it's a great rivalry because they'd won this and that. No, essentially, you just liked the style of game that Liverpool played against you because it was an attack and that suited you. But when a team breaks that up, you now don't like it. And we did, I know I've gone off a bit, but we did feel, it felt quite comfortable. I assumed that the second half would have been great though. City might have scored and it might have been a fair 2-2 or, they might have even got a couple and won it. But at the time, it looked like we were quite comfortable, really.
Yeah, I think that's a big compliment to the way that Arsenal are playing now, especially when they're setting up against a team that's really difficult to beat like City. You kind of have to be almost perfect, don't you? Make very few mistakes because they'll capitalise. Yeah. And especially when they went down to 10 men, it kind of had to be that way, really, in the second half. It's a real shame, really, because the game was heading to being a really entertaining second half. So, Myles, the second yellow for Leandro Trossard.
Why are you going to Myles for that?
Because
why are you going to Myles for the second yellow?
I feel like we know the flavour of the conversation with you. You'll have your moment, mate, believe me.
Smart.
However, let's get an unbiased take, shall we? And I know you've got Arsenal supporting family, Myles, so tread carefully, yeah?
Trust me, I know too.
It's a disappointing situation to see a player sent off so early in such a big game. But when you're on a yellow card, is there any way you can excuse that from Trossard? I don't know. I mean, you could see his reaction straight away. He regretted it, didn't he?
Yeah, it's such a difficult situation to judge because it is such a fluid motion and it happens so quickly that I can feel some sympathy for him. But ultimately, you have seen firsthand what happened to your teammate 2 weeks ago. You know it can happen. You know that they've gone with this whole motion of we're laying down the letter of the law, we're going to be harder on it. I just don't want to see my player do it in the first place and put myself in a position. And we looked at it a lot on whether he even meant to kick the ball away, whether he was still playing, whether he'd heard the whistle. The way he hits the ball and the fact that he spins and looks at the ref as soon as he hits it, almost I think made it worse for him because it made it look like he had heard the ref. It was like that motion got him in more trouble than it was worth. And it's unfortunate. And the argument that you'll hear from Arsenal fans consistently is one that we'll all agree with, that you want to see consistency with it. And there are so many examples that are being drawn about Szoboszlai last week or when it was João Pedro against Brighton. It's frustrating to see that not get punished if you're going to punish other moments. Yes, but we said it the other week, didn't we? Wanting consistency is fine, but settling for consistently wrong is not fine. So you can't criticise the times where it's applied correctly. You have to criticise the times where it's been applied wrong. And that's the difficult part. It's really unfortunate for Arsenal that the two times it's been nailed down really clearly is on them. And it's not a rule any of us want to see. That's not why that rule was brought in. It was brought in for case of dissent or breaking at play. And Trossard's one, I think, is far harsher than Rice's. But you knew it was going to happen. And that's the frustrating thing. That's why if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be going, don't do that. Don't give us that position. It's annoying.
Well, I think the first yellow, weirdly, was like the most harsh. I feel like that one shouldn't have even been given, really. So to be on a yellow already, I felt it was kind of unfortunate for Trossard. But go on then, Isaac, let's hear your take on this. The dust has settled a little bit now. I'm guessing you've calmed down and you've accepted the decision, right?
Seatbelts fastened, guys.
Not at all. I still feel as strongly today as I do about it yesterday. I think listening to the game and the commentary after and people trying to dissect of, if there's no whistle there, he plays that out with his side of his foot. For me, it's nonsense. You cannot start going down that road and making up, because you don't know. You're not him. You don't know. And when you watch it back, I've watched it back a million times. Obviously, the time between the whistle and it's a to me, it's a non-starter. I don't think he gives him a decision to make. So I completely disagree with that line of thinking. I know a lot of people say it's fine. The time is too short. He's like, the whistle goes and he's mid-flow playing a ball. However he plays it out, it's up to anyone else's judgment. That's fine. He's not delaying a restart. The ball is in his control up wherever the height is, and he's coming to swing for it. What is he delaying there? There's someone sitting on the ground which would need to be sorted out. They've then got to see if he's okay and go for it. There's no restart being delayed, and he's not trying to waste time. His winger is on the go. He's ready. So he's trying to set him off. I don't see what problem he's trying to cause for the other side there to warrant the card. And the thing for me in the Rice instance and this instance is it's the chomping at the bit to get the card out. It's almost like they cannot wait to get out of their pocket. They're itching. It's like he's like running around with his hand in his top pocket to go. And you saw with the Rice one, he's going, "Sorry, I've got to." I'm still frustrated about that, but again, you can see how you could see how that I think it could have been let go, but you could see how that would be more easily applied than the Trossard one. Yeah. He doesn't have to do anything there. It's not so. If he doesn't give a card there, I don't think it would be spoken about today as even a point of contention. And the only reason we're talking about the Doku one and Bernardo Silva dribbling the ball off after it's already in place, the only reason they're being spoken about is because Trossard got sent off. And again, if the Trossard call isn't made, you don't talk about Doku and you don't talk about Silva, which I think shows me as a general rule, no one really sees this rule. No one likes it. No one likes the way it's being implemented. If the ball goes and you boot it off, that's always been a rule. So maybe just be a little bit stricter on that. But to take it to the levels they have in wrecking games. The same ref last year said he didn't send Kovacic off for that nasty challenge because he didn't want to ruin the game. So why did you take the opportunity to jump in so fiercely as you did?
Yeah, I think you're right about the timing. Like the time between the challenge being made and the ball being kicked and then the yellow card being shown. I kind of half thought he was going to show the yellow for the challenge because he kind of went into the back of the player.
We were wondering that.
And if he'd have said that, I'd have been like, what, fair enough, that's kind of 50-50. But for kicking the ball away and delaying play sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? And so petty. But I guess he's put it in his match report and I think he said it straight away. That's the reason for the yellow, didn't he? On the comms, I'm sure he did. So
he did.
That's what's on the record. So I guess the rules are black and white in that respect. It does kill the game though, and that's really frustrating for neutrals because it was a really good game up to that point. I was really enjoying it, and the second half would have been a cracker, I think. But as for the second half, Myles, Arsenal's resilience in defence eventually being broken, obviously, by, I think, a good shuffling of the pack from Pep Guardiola, to be fair. Like tactically, he brought on the players that needed to unpick the Arsenal defence. But some positives for Arsenal to take away from the way they did hold firm and they didn't get beaten, I guess.
Yeah, mostly. I think the defensive shape and the organisation, you can see how strong that is as a unit. And you always talk about how titles are built on a solid defence, and Arsenal are showing that. That seems to be their real plan this year, to just be stronger at the back than anyone else. I do think they could have maybe tweaked a couple of little things. Like, we were getting so frustrated watching them just give the ball back to City consistently. And it felt like the only breaks in play were when a player went down, rather than Arsenal just holding the ball for 5 minutes and just passing it around the back, or just having that out ball. Taking Saka off was bizarre to me because he's got the defensive work rate to track back when you need him to, but he's got the pace and the work ethic to just harass players. So unless that was a knock or an injury, he was the wrong change, I think. And I mean, this stats come out that Timber and Havertz are the first players to have ever played a full game and not completed a pass. Yeah. And it's in the same game. Like, I think that shows you the quality that Arsenal were trying to produce. It was just get this away, put 10 men behind the ball and hope for the best. And they held firm for a long time, but it's exhausting. Imagine chasing City for that long. And if you're ever going to be able to do it successfully, it should be that moment. They've got no De Bruyne, no Rodri. But you're right, Pep knew what he needed. We said it, we called it straight away. It was obvious that he was going to bring on Grealish and Foden because they're, as wingers, they're not looking for space in behind. They're looking to work the space for themselves. And Grealish did it. He won the corner by doing it, and then he drew 3 defenders out to him from that short corner, and it opened Arsenal up for the first time. And it's so unfortunate that it's that late in the game, but it's a hard task, 10 men against any side.
It's actually we're in the title race then, really, which is, disappointing, I think, from most neutrals' point of view. And the highlight of my day was seeing Pep Guardiola kicking the crap out of that chair as well in the dugout.
I forgot to mention that. I've got why he's not sent off. Another one. Thanks. Yes, Mike. I forgot to mention that. Just
the pure joy I get of seeing him getting frustrated, because he's such an odd character, isn't he? But yeah, City managing to grab the point. We're going to have to move on now to talk about a team that's really kind of surprised me this weekend, beating Newcastle 3-1, and that's Fulham. Now, Newcastle obviously handed the game to them on a plate in some respects, but one player in particular, I think in Emile Smith-Rowe, has had a fantastic start to the season, and their record signing, of course, taken away from Arsenal, playing in a kind of a free role in the middle of as like a number 10, a free roaming number 10 for Fulham, isn't he? And so far, Isaac, playing the kind of football I think we saw at the start of his career when he first broke onto the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny going to watch him when he was younger, and him and Saka bursting through, and probably Arteta has them two to thank for still having a job at some point, because it was them two really. They were the light in such a poor Arsenal side, and I think it was so upsetting seeing him go. Like, you never want to see one of the academy boys that then breaks into the first team. You don't want to see him go. So when he went, it was a shame, but of course you understand it, mate. He wants to play football. He doesn't want to sit on the bench, and that's what he unfortunately would be doing behind Odegaard. But to see him pick up exactly where he left off pre-injury is so great, because you just watch him and it's almost like watching your son play. Do you know what I mean? You're like, yeah, I'm so happy that you're enjoying yourself. Like, this is exactly what I knew you could always do, and I'm so happy you're going to do it, and he'll carry on to do it, and he's a fantastic player, and hopefully he just goes from strength to strength.
Well, you mentioned him looking like he was enjoying himself, and I think that's the thing since he's been back at Fulham, Myles, is this like feeling that he's like a big fish in a small pond almost, and I think that's kind of true, because his reputation has diminished a little bit, I think, since he's been injured, and he's not hit the same heights, but we know what kind of player he can be. It looks like he could potentially be one of those players that's knocking on the England door again, doesn't it? Because he had a moment where he was like on the fringes. And how many players are we saying that about so far in the Premier League this season? English players looking to break in. But I think with the new era starting, it could be a great chance for Smith-Rowe to kind of get back in the England fold, couldn't it?
That's his only issue, I suppose, that there are so many in that sort of position that do it. But he's under an excellent coach with Marco Silva. He's got great experience from his time at Arsenal. And yeah, you're right. Now he is the man that the team's going to be built around. And he seems to be stepping up to that really, really well. The link-up play between him, Iwobi and Traore has been really, really effective. We've got Jimenez looking like his prime self again. His finishing has been outstanding. And then obviously you've got Reece Nelson, who he knows so well, coming in to kind of work with him as well. And he'll only get more and more game time for Fulham. So it is kind of laid out for Smith-Rowe to be the star now. And that seems to be something that's never really been daunting to him. He came into the Arsenal setup so young and was controlling games in the middle of the park. And he's a funny one for me. He feels like almost like a time capsule of this podcast, because he was coming through just at the time that we started this podcast. I remember talking about him going, oh yeah, good player. I just want to see him score goals. He never scores anything. And then he scored 4 weeks in a row after I said it was so ridiculous. So he's haunted me for a while. So it's nice to see him kind of hit this kind of prime period of his career now.
Fulham, though, are an interesting one, aren't they? Because they're one of these streaky teams, aren't they, Isaac, where occasionally you'll see them win 3 or 4 games in a row, or they'll pull out, like last season, it was a couple of 5-0 wins in a row, and we sit up and take notice of them and go, actually, they're pretty good. But this season, it feels like they've consistently been pretty steady in every game. In fact, they'll probably be a bit gutted to have drawn a couple of games and not won them instead, because the table looks pretty positive for them so far. But how good are Fulham, do you think, after the start you've seen?
Yeah, it is a funny one, because they were like a bit of a yo-yo team for a while, weren't they? And they come up and you always wanted a bit more for them, but like they just never really done anything. So last season, when they sort of established themselves, and you thought, okay, all right, and everyone seemed, like you say, we all started to pay attention and say, right, Fulham have got something about them. And that's why I would, again, as upsetting it was to see 2 of the players go, it was nice to see them go there, because you thought, okay, you can see where they're trying to go, and if they can just get a bit of recruitment, which I feel they have done very well, and everyone seemed to have slotted in. There's no reason why they can't have a really, really strong season, and hopefully then start pushing for European places, really.
Wow, optimistic for them. There's a lot of competition around the area of the league, isn't there, for European places? Are you feeling that Fulham could be one of those teams knocking on the door, Myles?
Yeah, I think with the coach they've got, Marco Silva's excellent, isn't he? It's just about if he sticks on for long enough, because we've seen him in the past kind of get itchy feet and want to look for something bigger. He seems to have a real connection with Fulham, though.
I think he's shaking that off.
Yeah, I think maybe this is his kind of, I know that I've found a really good level here where I could do something important, and he'll wait for like the really big job to come up if it was going to take him to move. But I think they look really strong, and they've built a really good foundation. Bringing Anderson back's really good. Tete's been fantastic as well down that right with Traore. So there's plenty to go around with Fulham that is probably more exciting than a lot of the other sort of mid-table clubs right now. So you probably think they've got the ceiling above them to kind of kick on now.
Well, that's it for part 1 of the podcast. Join us in part 2 where we discuss Champions League hangover. What Champions League hangover? Aston Villa win 3-1 against the Wolves. Join us then. Cool. Welcome back to part 2 of the Football Diary podcast this week. And we're going to jump straight in with that team that we love talking about on this pod, especially at the minute when the good times are rolling. That's Aston Villa, who put neighbours Wolves to the sword with a 3-1 victory. And question marks, I guess, against any team that's going into Champions League football for the first time on how they'll respond on the first game back. Obviously, a convincing win in Europe for Villa midweek, followed on by this really satisfying victory over Wolves. It's been a really positive week for your boys, hasn't it, mate?
Yeah, incredible. I can't quite put into words what it felt like watching them play in the Champions League. It was unfortunate that it was like a 5:45 Tuesday kickoff, but it didn't take anything away from it. So having that and then coming straight back to beat Wolves as well, it just shows you the growth of this club. And like, it's about 2 years now since Emery joined, just under, and thinking about what we're doing these days, I can't fathom it almost. So it's been fantastic.
It was a game that was kind of tied on the score sheet, at least for large parts. And then obviously a goal from Mesri Konsa, which was great to see. And that guy, John Duran, again, brought around a really patient win for Villa. Because on paper, I guess 3-1 looks kind of quite dominant, quite flattering, but they left it quite late. So credit to Villa for that, first of all. But what are you seeing about Villa that kind of manifested in this game in particular that's kind of keeping that smile going for Villa fans? Because it was a bit cagey at times, but there's never any doubt with the minute, it feels like. It feels like by the time you get into that 70, 80th minute part of a game, you've still got enough in the locker. And I think Duran's probably testament to that. But even someone like Tielemans, he's just an engine in midfield, isn't he? And he kind of ran the show again. Yeah,
it's so true that for the longest time, there was a period where if Villa went behind, you felt like the game was done and you may as well go home then. And now I'm of the complete opposite opinion of I watch us go behind, then I go, okay, we've got time, we'll be fine. I felt it against Everton. I certainly felt it here. We gave them a goal, although Cunha took it incredibly well. Obviously, bringing Carlos back into the lineup, he looked a bit rusty at times and was kind of giving possession away a bit too cheaply. But he'll grow back into that role and we'll see a really firm defensive line, I think. And then it was all about keeping that composure. And that composure was held on to really well, as you say, by Tielemans and the introduction of Ross Barkley. That midfield just looks so secure. They're willing to protect the ball. They know when the right time to play a pass is. And when they do play the pass, 9 times out of 10, it's just perfect, particularly with Tielemans. Like, he's having an incredible start to the season. And we did special podcasts in the summer about who was going to be Douglas Luiz's replacement. And we talked about who Villa could go and sign, whether it was going to be Gallagher or McKennie or who it might be. We had him already. And Tielemans is really stepping up. He's been so good. He was man of the match in the Champions League, obviously got our first goal going there. His delivery in this game for Konsa's goal was just superb. And having that central area controlled by him and Rodgers just in front of him, Villa look really, really good going forward now. We've still got defensive frailties we need to fix, but Tielemans is just controlling everything at the moment. Yeah,
it was a funny game, wasn't it? Obviously, on the back of the European game. And I do think you could tell there was some fatigue there, but I think that added to obviously the tributes to Gary Shaw as well at the start of the game, paying their respects to him, such obviously an icon of the club. It gave a feeling of kind of a bit of a cloud over the game for a while. So it took a while for the team to shake that off. Wouldn't you say that's fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you heard Emery's comments after the Champions League win, that he wanted to dedicate that to Gary Shaw, and then Ezri Konsa came out and talked about it again afterwards and said that now we're back in front of our fans again. We wanted to do it for him and his family. Like, you can see the fact that the players are out talking about it after the game. It's the first thing they're saying, not talking about him getting a match-winning goal. It was really on their minds, and really fitting that number 8, Yuri Tielemans, is the player we're talking about. Obviously, that was Shaw's number as well. So it felt like almost like a fitting tribute on the pitch as well. And it's nice to see that they kind of acknowledge that heritage, because he was such an instrumental player in the finest moment in Villa's history. So touch him.
It was another challenge, another spanner in the works potentially with McGinn going off as well. And like you say, that midfield was the reason that the kind of performance turned around later in the game. Like, the engine seemed to kind of grow as the going got more tough and questions were being asked. The team seemed to grow in the middle of the park despite McGinn going off. And again, another great tick in the box that the captain's not there for the second half, and yet they still pull out that kind of performance. Yeah,
the midfield depth is so good this year. Obviously, Onana starts the game as well, and that's another option. Kamara's still to come back. Ramsey slotted back in and looks brilliant. He was excellent midweek in the Champions League game as well and got his goal, which he really deserved. So it's nice to see that Villa have got so many weapons, it feels like, right now. They've got so many ways to break teams down. And that always felt like something we were lacking. We had Watkins up front, and getting the ball to him just seemed so hard. And now you've got Rodgers driving through and beating players and laying it to him for the goal. Or you've got Tielemans finding him from deep, or Bailey hitting the byline. And that's so good to see. You never know what Villa are going to do to beat you, but you know they're going to take their time to do it. And that's brilliant. Obviously, we've had quite a favourable run of fixtures, I think you can say. Obviously, the Arsenal game is the one that stands out. And then other than that, we played West Ham, who struggled for form, played Leicester, Everton and Wolves, who are obviously 3 teams right down the bottom right now. We'll see how it gets when we're tested more often with tougher opponents alongside Champions League commitments. But right now, there can be no complaints. It looks excellent. And we're third. The same top 4 as last year, which we called at the start of the season. It's already taken shape now, and I just hope we can keep that up.
Yeah, I think one of the most positive things, I think even for neutrals, we're seeing that cross from Tielemans, first of all, but then Ezri Konsa on the end of it. It's great to see Konsa getting in amongst it and, you know, contributing and just being on the pitch again. And I think they've really missed Konsa, haven't they? But that cross from Tielemans was superb too. But I think that the highlight for me is seeing John Duran score again. Every time he kind of comes on, I feel like something's going to happen. I think he feels like something's going to happen. And last week we mentioned how Duran probably feels like he should be starting. And I think the way he's been performing and contributing, there's not many would argue with the fact that he should be given a chance maybe in cup games or something. Is there room for him to play a bigger role and maybe having 2 up front, do you think? Is that something that the system could accommodate?
I don't know. If anyone's going to do it and get it right, it's Emery. But we've seen this with Watkins before. Obviously, they tried to get Watkins and Ings in, and it meant that Watkins ended up playing basically out wide. And that left-hand side's already occupied now by either McGinn or Ramsey or Rodgers. There's always someone that can fill that role. So I don't want to shoehorn him in because of his good form, because ultimately Watkins is better for the team. Duran, I love Duran as an option. And if we can keep him happy while giving him 30 minutes every game to just come on at the end and disrupt defences that are tired, it's a great role to have. Like, let's not take that for granted. We've seen players do that really effectively at some big clubs before. We would have called Trossard that sort of player for Arsenal right now. Liverpool and their depth up front means that Jota was doing that for a while, or Gakpo was doing that. You need rotation options. You need players that can make an impact off the bench. It doesn't mean that they all have to start every game, because who do you drop for Duran?
That's the question.
It does.
Yeah.
It changes the whole system. So you either take Bailey out, who was one of our best players last year, you take out Ramsey or Rodgers, and that can't happen because they've started the season so well, or you lose a bit of that midfield control, and no one wants to see that either. So I think you just have to be smart about how you rotate them. I mean, look at Liverpool. They started Núñez this weekend over Jota, and he gets a goal, and they're being really clever about how they drop their kind of 6 forwards in at different spaces. We'll do that. It's a long season. We've got 8 Champions League games guaranteed, 38 in the league, a couple of games in each cup, hopefully, and you never know. There's always opportunities, but I don't want to just shoehorn him in next to him.
No, I think his expectations are being managed by Emery. I think, as are all players, that they will get a chance. They've just got to take it.
Of course.
I guess so far he's playing his part of that bargain, isn't he? He's taking his chance when it comes. I think when he starts, he's really got to show what he's made of, though. So if he does get a chance in any cup games, then we'll see what he's actually made of. It's probably against some obscure team from League Two in the Carabao Cup or something. But hey, it's still a chance, isn't it?
Yeah, we got Wickham midweek, so maybe that's it.
I'm thinking there's a lot of clubs in the Premier League that are going through transition, and it feels like they have been for a while. There's a few that have had a lot of changes in the management or turnover of players, but there's very few clubs that are stable. And I think probably like Liverpool at the minute, they've started really well. They look pretty positive so far. Who else? Chelsea, I guess, are turning a corner. We'll talk about those in a moment. But Villa probably are arguably the most positive, upwardly mobile, best momentum in a club and best feeling amongst the fans in the Premier League. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it feels like that. I think the argument is us and Arsenal, because Arsenal are trying to compete at that top level again. But
of course, yeah.
It feels like there's always a frustration with them because they're just falling short of competing with City. But they can't see any complaint from the footballing side of things. The things on the pitch for Villa right now are so perfect that fans, they can't say anything else. Obviously, there's a frustration around like the pricing and some of the conditions at the stadium at times. But generally speaking, yeah, it's such a perfect moment to be a Villa fan. Like the sense of pride I felt watching the Champions League game, which we get a comfortable win away from home in our first game back, where we could have been intimidated by the occasion, players that have never played at that level before, and they just took to it so well. And it should have been 5-0. We won 3 away from home. It's such a great performance. And those little things just remind you of why you've got so much confidence in Emery and the club. And the fact that we followed that up with a win, whatever the opposition, that's so important. I think Wolves have got all their own problems right now, and I'm sure we'll take a minute to kind of talk about them. But Villa can only beat what was in front of them. And how many times have we seen little slips from teams who have played Champions League football midweek when they come to the weekend? So, yeah, things are excellent right now. It's so encouraging. And you can see how the system is like slowly adapting. Like you mentioned Ezri Konsa and how important he was. I said at the beginning of the season, what I anticipated was that he was going to be the right back and we're going to be fine. And as soon as we have another fit centre back, he slots into a new position basically and fulfills it excellently and performs in an attacking capacity. And it shows you what Emery can get this squad doing and the development that they've all made. Like you gave him a shout the other day about where the legacy of this current Aston Villa side came from, and you'll see so many people saying about Dean Smith laying the groundwork for all of this. But I don't think any of us ever anticipated it would hit this height this quickly. It's amazing.
Briefly, top of the Champions League as well. That was a weird feeling.
There was a moment.
Strange.
There was a moment where I thought we were winning the whole thing. Fantastic. We're still above Arsenal in the league and the Champions League. That's all I'll take from this.
Yeah, good to see you not getting carried away, hey Myles. But let's reflect on Wolves as well. It's been a difficult start to the season for them. Obviously, in the relegation zone already, Gary O'Neill lost 2 of his best players, to be fair, in the summer. So it's going to hit him hard. But I think I've seen glimpses of Wolves still playing positive football. I feel like they've been unlucky to lose a couple of games, but are you worried?
Yeah, I said to you, didn't I, before we recorded, I think I said on Saturday that I thought we might be looking at least 2 manager conversations to have where people had lost their jobs already. And I think O'Neill was probably quite high on the pecking order there. I think if Wolves could finance it and get the right person in, they definitely would, because the form at the back end of last season really dropped off. They started so well and then it really seemed to take a dip, and then they've started this season horribly. And you are right, the circumstances around that, losing Neto, losing Kilman, not really replacing them is really difficult. It is really difficult, and I feel for O'Neill. But I don't know. It's a hard start to the season as well.
Yeah,
their run of fixtures has been awful, really.
It still is, I think.
So maybe there's some goodwill amongst the board to kind of keep him going for a little bit longer. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this week or next week we're talking about at least 2 managers leaving their jobs.
Well, that's my next question. We'll go on to West Ham 0, Chelsea 3. Before we talk about Chelsea's much more positive and sustained start to the season, let's take a moment to reflect on West Ham, who you had high predictions for finishing in the top 6, and they've spent some money this summer. We've got Julian Lopetegui there, who's obviously a coach that's quite held in high esteem. So it looked like the pieces were in place, but they've struggled. And I guess with a team being assembled so quickly and a lot of money being spent in a short space of time, that could happen. But losing 3-0 to Chelsea is not even the worst we've seen of West Ham this season. They've had some shocking performances, haven't they? And what's quite what's not quite working for them so far, do you think? And are you worried about Lopetegui's job?
I love that you dropped in that I predicted that they were going to be top 6, just to remind me that
got to hold us to account.
Talk a lot of nonsense sometimes. I'm not worried about Lopetegui's job. It's too early for that. If you're bringing in a manager of that sort of reputation and that sort of regard, you've got to give him more than 5 games. So I think he'll have a bit longer, definitely. And I think when some of the new players settle in a bit more, we'll see. But I'm really interested by why Tadebo's not playing.
True.
Because the thing for West Ham this weekend was they were so open. Like, I felt like Jackson could do whatever he wanted. And we're not talking about Primar 9 here. We're talking about someone who's been a bit of a figure of fun in the league, perhaps harshly at times.
Yeah, I think
but
so.
He absolutely destroyed West Ham's defence. And it was Edson Alvarez, wasn't it, that they dropped into the back line. And he just never looked prepared for it. And when you know that Chelsea have got 3 great forwards starting every game with Palmer supporting them, and then they can bring 3 more on as well. So you're going to have a torrid time defensively if you're not on it. Putting someone out of position into a new system, it just felt completely wrong. And fair play to Chelsea, they capitalised on it. And West Ham, I think, got made to look a little bit naive in this game. And I think their fans were quite frustrated that it was so simple for Chelsea to play through them because it looked too easy, didn't it?
But you could see it, like you say, tactically, that it didn't look cohesive. It didn't look to make much sense. And why change it in a game like this? You know, they need to get a home win under their belts. And I think that's the thing that Curry's favourite with fans, is if you're doing it at home or at least trying. And 3-0 to Chelsea won't go down well at all. And you can see there's unrest amongst the fans, even though they know that Lopetegui is probably the best coach they can probably get right now. So maybe it's a waiting game and a game of patience. But credit to Chelsea, though. Like you say, Nicholas Jackson, 2 goals within the first, 20 minutes or so is incredible and set the tone for the game. And they've finally found, I think, a rhythm in front of goal. They've got the talent to do that, of course. But they weren't really tested defensively an awful lot either. I think Mo Kudus had plenty of opportunity, but he felt like he was running on his own quite a lot. I don't know if you felt the same. But I think Chelsea looked comfortable for the majority, and they've got quite a settled team now for the first time in what feels like 3 years. Jadon Sancho's obviously having an impact within his first couple of games as well. Suddenly, Enzo Maresca's job looks a lot more positive, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting because the course of the season's what's going to determine how well that all pans out, isn't it? Because at the moment, he's rotating his forward options. He's kind of selected the players that he wants starting games. But by the end of the season, are those players happy with the amount of game time they've got when the squad is so heavy? We've talked about that already. Like this game, they brought on Neto, they brought on Felix, they brought on Nkunku. You've got Mikhailo Mudryk still sat on the bench. So there's always going to be someone that misses out. And at the moment, they're utilising those options really well. And it feels like people are competing for those places. When it gets more settled and the competition seems to die down, do we get the same level of performance out of them? That's what's really interesting. I think Chelsea have done a lot of work on making a lot of their contracts based on performance rather than base wages. So players like Jackson, players like Madueke, they're incentivised to keep this form going. And yeah, so far, it looks pretty good for Chelsea. There's been a couple of games where they've maybe dropped off from what we would expect of them. But in this game, we saw probably the best of them going forward. And that was led from midfield too. Caicedo was excellent, which is really helpful. Palmer's playing his role just as well. And you mentioned Sancho. And we all kind of laughed at that as a sign-in, wondered why they would need that when they just brought Neto in, when they've already got so many options out wide. But he is looking pretty close to his best at the moment. Yeah. He looks really, really sharp. True. Looks good with the ball at his feet. He's ready for it.
It feels in some ways that was a low-risk move for Chelsea and for Sancho, because even if it was worst-case scenario and he flopped and struggled to feature, like you knew it didn't hit the club too hard. So I felt like it was a positive environment for him to work under no pressure. And I think that's important for Sancho at the minute, is to be able to have the chance to shine. And I think showing faith in him and putting him in straight away into action is kind of a positive thing for him to do from a man management point of view. We've said a lot about Enzo Maresca being quite a ruthless coach, but I think his handling of Sancho has kind of been key to him hitting the ground running in some ways.
Yeah, and I think having that trust in him being back in an environment in London where he feels more comfortable, it just looks like a player that's going to settle quite quickly, doesn't it? And that doesn't seem like what we would have expected from Chelsea as an environment when you're seeing players shipped off every 5 seconds. I can't think of a worse place to sign right now when I see the treatment of some of the players there. But it's going to work for others. And I think if you are the guy that is being picked above all other options, then yeah, that's going to feel like a real confidence boost, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in some ways, Maresca coming in and saying, these are the 22, 25 players that I am going to play and rotate. Here's the rest of the squad that are going to have to find somewhere else to play. You're removing any question marks about whether they will play because you know there's going to be a core of players that just need to go. I think that kind of clarity has helped the players that he's picked in his squad to actually know they've got a chance. And then that wasn't there, I think, for the last couple of years. Pochettino's such a nice guy. I don't think he wanted to disappoint anybody. So maybe that kind of hard approach to players knowing where they stand has helped them flourish a little bit more. Like you say, with Villa, they've got a lot of competition for places, but a lot of football to be played. Maybe that's the case for Chelsea as well. And the squad know they're going to get game time. And that's probably enabled them a little bit.
Yeah, they've got Conference League football this week, right? So they can utilise a bit more of the squad there.
Yeah, well, get that in there. The Conference League as well. It feels so weird to say that, doesn't it, for a Chelsea team that should be performing so much higher? Because I think their squad value is, I think it's like 1.2 billion, and the next that's how much their squad is worth. I think according to Transfer Market, the next most expensive squad is worth about 300,000 or something. No, sorry, 300 million or something like that, which is such a drop off, isn't it? But that's the Conference League, isn't it? That's the level they're at the minute.
Oh, in that competition, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Like the next most valuable squad.
I thought City would have something to say about that.
No. The next most valuable squad in the Conference League. So they have to win that competition, really, don't they? But
they said that about us last year.
Very true, yeah. It's not quite straightforward as you make out, is it? But yeah, positive for Chelsea, I think. Still a few warning signs for West Ham. As for the rest of the Premier League, before we wrap up, Myles, one game I want to shout out is Ipswich grabbing that dramatic late equaliser against Southampton. I think that's really kind of going to give them a bit of a boost. They needed to beat Southampton, really. They didn't. So the next best way to go about it is to grab a last-minute equaliser, isn't it? Yeah. Any other games stand out for you?
Well, I said that I thought we might be talking about two managers going. The other one, Everton, going behind again. Well, dropping a lead again and dropping points. That game, to me, Leicester, they'll be frustrated that they didn't kind of capitalise on Everton's terrible start to the fullest extent. But Everton, you have to be winning that game once you're 1-0 up. And the fact that they're still right at the bottom, 1.5 games in, they've got to be thinking about whether they need to make a change there as well, aren't they? I think there's a few managers. What was funny was when I put that to the group, said I think two managers might be gone this week, about 4 names were mentioned. Dave was questioning whether Cooper was going to stay as well. I think Everton really are looking over their shoulder at the moment. But there's more talk of takeover today as well.
Yeah, which is interesting. Which is positive. And I think, again, that kind of stability that the club needs right now is just knowing where they stand in the future. Because
absolutely,
I don't know what they're going to do from a coaching point of view. Like Sean Dyche is on shaky ground, isn't he?
Feels like it, yeah. And I don't want to sound like Erling Haaland talking to Mikel Arteta at the end of the game, but were Man United humbled a little bit because they beat Barnsley 7-0 and everyone was talking like Rashford was going to get the Ballon d'Or this year and you were going to go on to fire up the table, sitting 11th after a 0-0 with Palace.
Yeah, that's not good enough. It's really not. And again, another inexplicable man management decision to kind of drop Rashford. I don't know what he decided to do. Garnacho is obviously a great option to have, but I think it's killed any momentum that Rashford kind of has built up. So yeah, weird from him.
We've been saying for weeks, get Rashford out the starting 11.
I know.
In. He doesn't do it. Rashford scores 2 weeks in a row and then he takes him out. I'm convinced Ten Hag's trying to record a reality series or something of how bad can I be and keep my job. It's like he's on a dare.
Well, the sack race is interesting. Who are you saying at this stage is the favourite to get sacked then next?
It's going to be O'Neill or Dyche, I think. It's going to be one of those two. Definitely.
Which one? I think Dyche deserves it, to be fair. O'Neill has been a little bit unlucky.
I think it would be Dyche if it wasn't for the ownership question, but I don't think the owners will pay him off if they're in the middle of selling. O'Neill might get a bit more grace because the fixtures are so hard, but I think it's probably going to be him. I think he's the one that I would look at the moment. But I'm still saying by Christmas, Ten Hag's gone.
Okay. To be honest, the way the season's playing so far, I'm not seeing enough progress to make me feel like he's the right guy as well. No, and I've never really been Ten Hag out, but I'm struggling to say Ten Hag in with every passing game, but we'll see.
Before we go, really quick shout for WSL being back.
True, yeah. Nice
Arsenal, Man City, again, as well. Yeah. Also 2-2. And that was full of some stories as well. Like, Miedema comes back to play Arsenal in her first game of the WSL season. Scores. Ridiculous.
Bound to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one with Chelsea kind of looking like a whole new side as well. We're just used to them kind of running away with it feels like. And now that it's most open title race we'll see, and Man City seem like they're really on a warpath to kind of take Emma Hayes' crown.
Yeah, well, was it 6 titles in a row, or are they on 6 if they win? But either way, Chelsea are dominating, aren't they, in the WSL? So maybe changes of foot, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, City look frightening. Like, bringing Miedemar in when they've already got Bunny Shaw, they've already got Chloe Kelly, they've already got Lauren Hem, they've already got Mary Fowler. That's a stacked forward line. They're going to blow some things away this year.
In the women's game, doesn't it? Where big players move to other big clubs on free transfers as well, quite frequently.
Yeah, crazy.
Mad. Yeah,
maybe it's the easiest way to get around not wanting to spend money on it, I suppose.
That's going to say that's a sign of just the lack of money in the women's game. But the new TV deal has been announced as well, which I think is almost double what it was last season. So that's a bit of positive news and a sign that the game's going in the right direction at least. So
yeah definitely.
That's it for this week's pod. Myles, thank you. Thank you to Isaac as well for jumping on from an Arsenal perspective. It was interesting to get his take on their performance, and thankfully no conspiracy theories mentioned on the pod at least. But once we'd finished recording, we'll see it all come out. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in once again. Please do hop over to all of our socials. Obviously, like, subscribe, everything. Share what you see. Just help us in our growth and our continued growth, hopefully going forward. But until next week, mate, speak to you soon.
Thanks, man.
See you later.